Okay. Has any parent ever said or any child ever heard the phrase, be still? And if you're a parent and you've got a little guy like my guy back there, you're pretty familiar with what you mean by be still when you say it. Not that they necessarily understand it themselves. So if you're one of those, a child or a parent, this lesson will apply to you. As well as it does me, as always, I tend to present the things that I've been dealing with the most in my head recently because they're closer to my heart. And I might interject here, we're studying Gideon, and we're about at that point where Gideon wanted some confirmation because he was asked to do a thing that takes a rather large amount of courage, and you would like to believe that God was with you. We can think about David. We can think about this very psalm is nestled amongst a lot of psalms that deal with personal trouble or national trouble. And so there's comfort to be found there when you have personal or national or societal kinds of trouble. So if you look, it was read to us earlier. We'll go back through the psalm just briefly, but not exactly in order. But the first 3 verses of Psalm 46, you get this picture of nature. There's mountains and there's water, and this water is roaring. I mean, the water is fierce. Like you can imagine the fierceness of water in the times of Noah when the rain came and the fountains of the deep broke up, and the fierceness of water and what it's capable of. And it's a thing to be feared in some sense, and the majesty of the mountains and the many that have, died trying to cross the mountains, probably not quite as much as those who have tried to cross the seas, but it's still a perilous picture in nature. In verse 6, you'll see that it skips to the subject of nations and kingdoms, and, the heathen will rage, and we worry about that in the world round about us, right? When nations start doing things and raging and stirring up some stuff, and we might be a little nervous about what might come next or whether or not that might come our way. But step back just a little bit to verses 4 and 5. And there's a picture here about God being in the midst, and she shall not be moved. There's an immovability if God is in the midst. And look again at verses 7 through 9 here. If the Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. There's protection there. There's that refuge that we've been singing about so much tonight. But that's if the Lord of hosts is with us. So the Lord is with us. If God is in the midst, maybe we shouldn't be so afraid. But I want to take you over to Mark chapter 4 for just a minute. So leave your finger here because we're going to come back over here. But in Mark chapter 4, beginning in verse 35, just a few short verses here. You know the story very, 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 very well. But this is the night that the storm comes upon the sea, and the disciples are scared to death. The waves are so big, the boat's filling up. And you know what happens when the boat fills up with water. It sinks. So they're all scurrying about trying to figure out how they're going to solve this imminent threat. And where's Jesus? The Son of Man hath not where to lay his head, he said. But on this occasion, he had a pillow, and he was asleep in the middle of this storm. I don't imagine the boat was setting still, but he is completely and perfectly at peace with the situation, and he's getting some surely much needed rest, right? So they come and they wake him up and they say, Master, don't you care that we're perishing? I mean, it's almost over. We're almost full up. So Jesus gets up and he says the simplest phrase, right? Peace, be still. So the Bible tells us that the wind ceased and there was a great calm. So this is a physical stillness, kind of like what we were reading about in this psalm over here, the mountains and the seas and the stuff like this. But look at what happens. Jesus asked them a question. Why were you fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Now he's questioning the fear they had regarding that physical storm out there. But look at the next verse, verse 41. Then they feared exceedingly. Well, they feared the storm. They were afraid of that. Jesus solved that for them. But yet now they're fearing exceedingly. Now why is that? What manner of man is this, that the wind and the sea obey him? So there's something else to fear. not just the physical elements around us, right? So they feared exceedingly. So flip back over real quick to Psalm 46. Verses 10 through 11, that's the end of it. He says, "Be still and know that I am God." Now look, that's you be still, right? Not the mountains, not the waters, not the nations, not the kingdoms, not those heathen that are raging. That's going to happen. You be still and know that I am God. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. So this would refer then to an internal spiritual peace, not the stillness of the waves on the outside, right? Kind of like what's mentioned over in Philippians 4, which you mentioned at the table down here this evening, right? But the admonition is given, be anxious about nothing. Be careful for nothing. Be full of care about nothing, right? But with what? Prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, right? Let your requests be made known unto God. And then what happens? Then what happens? Read the rest of it. "And the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." When the Lord is in our midst. Kind of like on that ship when the Lord was in their midst. Now here's what I take from this. Because we're all different. Certain things scare me that didn't scare David at all. Or Gideon at all. Or Samson at all. We have different fears. We have different anxieties from one another. So wherever our personal fears and anxieties are, that's the place where we need to put God. Like Jesus told Paul, and he's concluded, "My strength, is made perfect in weakness." Those are the points where we have to try to put him there so that the anxiety doesn't overwhelm us and win the day, which also in the songs that I noticed that we sang tonight. So we know, right, the storms of life are going to come with their roars. The heathen are going to rage. There's always going to be wars and rumors of wars. The Bible tells us that. So the peace we desire, it's not going to be found in nature. It's not going to be found in the kingdoms of men anywhere, okay, but it's going to be found in Christ. And that's exactly what the verse in Philippians told us, right? That peace that passes all understanding. What kind of peace did Jesus have when he was asleep on that boat? The kind that surpassed everybody else's understanding at that moment. Do you not care that we perish? But he knew the word, and he knew what his end would be, and he knew that it wouldn't be on a boat. So maybe that's why he wasn't too worried about that particular situation. But the point is that peace is in Christ Jesus. So the question I have to leave you with, right, is, well, are you in Christ Jesus? Galatians 3:27, right? "For you're all the children," actually this beginning of this lesson, if you were children, but you're all the children of God, right, by faith in Christ Jesus, right? As many of you have put on Christ, right, have been baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. So that is the means by which we get into Christ, to be in his midst, if you will. And to be in that safe place. But if you're not in Christ, you might have great reason to be anxious. Your future, at least your spiritual future, may be something to be a little anxious about. But perhaps you're like me, and from time to time, and more often as I get older, I had a lot more courage when I was young. And I think that's because I was really naive to how dangerous the danger really was. But David was young, but in his older age, writing those Psalms that this is compacted with, he had some fears and some troubles within him as he aged also. But you can be in Christ and still be troubled, still be a little anxious, but it's there, right, that we can pray with and for you, right, just like we read about in Philippians a minute ago, to overcome this, to get this fear and doubt out, because like the song was telling us, that is Satan at work. That is Satan at work. So whatever your issue is, the simple little phrase, right? Be still and know. Not think, not believe, not hope. Be still and know that he is God. Cast your care upon him tonight while we stand, while we sing.